The bullet ricocheted off the rock face inches from Clara Parsons's head as she urged her horse forward through the narrow canyon, the leather mailbag bouncing against her hip with each thundering hoofbeat. She had been riding the mail route through southwestern Colorado territory for 3 months now, and the desperados who haunted these mountains were getting bolder by the week. It was September of 1878, and the mining boom had brought not just fortune seekers to Georgetown, but also every manner of outlaw and criminal element that preyed on those who dared travel between the scattered settlements. Clara pressed herself low against her mare's neck as another shot rang out, the sound echoing off the canyon walls. She was 22 years old, with auburn hair she kept braided down her back and green eyes that had learned to spot danger before it fully revealed itself. Her father had died in a mining accident 2 years prior, leaving her and her mother with debts that threatened to swallow their small home whole. When the Postal Service announced they needed someone willing to carry mail through the dangerous mountain passes to the remote mining camps, Clara had been the only one to step forward. The pay was good enough to keep her mother fed and housed, and Clara had never been one to shy away from hard work or risk. The shooting stopped as suddenly as it had started. Clara kept riding, not daring to slow until she emerged from the canyon into the wider valley beyond. Her hands trembled slightly as she finally allowed herself to breathe normally again. That was when she noticed the rider following at a distance behind her. He had been there yesterday too, she realized with a start. A tall figure on a buckskin horse, keeping far enough back that she could not make out his features but close enough that his presence was unmistakable. Clara's first instinct was fear, but something about the way he rode made her pause. He had not approached during the ambush. In fact, now that she thought about it, the shooting had stopped right around the time he would have come into view of whoever had been firing at her. She continued toward the mining camp at Silver Plume, delivering letters and small packages to the miners who worked the claims scattered along the mountainside. By the time she turned back toward Georgetown, the autumn sun was beginning its descent toward the peaks, painting the aspens gold and orange. The mysterious rider was still there, maintaining his distance like a shadow. Clara made a decision. Instead of continuing on the main trail, she pulled her mare to a stop in a small clearing and waited. If this man meant her harm, better to face him on her own terms in the daylight than have him follow her all the way back to town. The rider approached slowly, his hands visible on the reins. As he drew closer, Clara could finally see him clearly. He was perhaps 25 or 26, with dark hair that curled slightly beneath his worn hat and gray eyes that held a wariness she recognized in her own mirror. He had the lean, weathered look of someone who spent his life outdoors, and his clothes, though dusty from travel, were well maintained. A rifle rested in a scabbard on his saddle, but his hands remained nowhere near it. "Miss," he said, touching the brim of his hat as he stopped a respectful distance away. "Name's Samuel Griffin. I apologize for following you without introducing myself proper, but I figured you might shoot first and ask questions later if I rode up on you sudden like in the canyon." Clara kept her hand near the revolver at her hip, a weapon she had learned to use with reasonable accuracy over the past months. "You figured right. Why are you following me at all?" Samuel shifted in his saddle, and his horse stamped a foot impatiently. "I heard in town that the Postal Service hired a woman to ride the mountain routes. Seemed like a dangerous job for anyone, let alone someone riding alone. I have been working as a ranch hand over near Empire, but the ranch sold off most of the herd, so I am between jobs at the moment. Thought maybe you could use someone watching your back." "I did not ask for help," Clara said, though her voice carried less edge than before. and I certainly cannot afford to pay someone to ride alongside me." "I am not asking for pay," Samuel said. His gray eyes met hers steadily. "I am asking if you would mind the company. There's plenty of people who would be interested in stealing mail or harming the person carrying it. 2 riders are harder to ambush than 1. Clara studied him for a long moment. Everything about her situation screamed that she should be suspicious, that trusting a strange man in the wilderness was the height of foolishness. But there was something in his direct gaze, something in the way he had kept his distance until she was ready to face him, that made her inclined to believe his intentions were genuine. "Why would you do that?" she asked. "Ride dangerous routes for no pay?" Samuel looked out at the mountains, his expression distant. "My sister used to work as a laundress in a mining camp near Leadville. She was traveling between camps when outlaws robbed the stage. They killed everyone aboard, including her. She was 19. He brought his gaze back to Clara. "If someone had been riding guard, maybe she would still be alive. So I figure I can do for you what no one did for her." The raw grief in his voice was unmistakable, and Clara felt her suspicion dissolving. She knew what it was like to lose someone, to be left with the weight of their absence. "I am sorry about your sister," she said quietly. "That must have been terrible." "It was 2 years ago," Samuel said, "but I still think about it every day, about how she was just trying to make a living same as anyone." Clara made her decision. "I ride this route 3 times a week. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. I leave Georgetown at dawn. If you want to come along, be at the edge of town before sunrise. I will not wait." A small smile crossed Samuel's face, the first she had seen from him. It softened his features considerably. "I will be there, Miss Parsons." "How do you know my name?" Asked around town. "Figured I should know who I was planning to follow into the mountains." Clara found herself almost smiling back. "Fair enough. I will see you Monday morning, Mr. Griffin. If you are late, the offer is withdrawn." "I will be there," he promised. True to his word, Samuel was waiting at the edge of Georgetown when Clara rode out on Monday morning, the sky still dark overhead but beginning to lighten in the east. She nodded to him, and he fell into position beside her as they headed up into the mountains. The first few rides together were quiet affairs. Samuel kept alert, his eyes constantly scanning the terrain around them, but he did not push for conversation beyond practical matters. Clara found she appreciated that. Too many men seemed to think women needed constant entertainment or instruction. Samuel simply rode, his presence steady and calm. It was on the 4th ride together, nearly 2 weeks after they had first met, that Clara began to open up. They had stopped to water the horses at a small creek, and Samuel had produced a canteen and some dried beef from his saddlebag. "You want some?" he offered. "I know the ride back to town is still long." Clara accepted the food gratefully. Her mother had packed her some bread that morning, but Clara had eaten it hours ago. "Thank you. I usually bring more, but we were running low on supplies at home." Samuel nodded but did not pry. After a moment of silence, Clara found herself talking anyway. "My father died in a cave-in at one of the mines 2 years back. He had debts I did not know about, gambling debts mostly. The men he owed came calling the week after we buried him, wanting their money. My mother and I have been working to pay them off ever since." "That is a heavy burden," Samuel said. "It is," Clara agreed, "but this job pays better than anything else I could find. Another year, maybe less, and we will have the debt cleared. Then maybe I can think about doing something else with my life." "What would you want to do?" Samuel asked. "If you could choose anything," Clara considered the question. No one had asked her that in so long that she had almost forgotten she was allowed to have dreams beyond mere survival. "I always liked learning," she said finally. "Reading and writing, numbers and such. My father believed girls should be educated, so he made sure I went to school for as long as he could afford it. I used to think maybe I could be a teacher someday. But that seems like a different life now, something from before. Before your father died, Samuel said. It was not a question. Yes. Everything divided into before and after that day. I am not the same person I was before. Samuel was quiet for a moment, then said, I understand that. I felt the same way after my sister died, like the world had split in two and I was living in the wrong half of it. Clara looked at him, seeing the shared grief that connected them. Does it get easier? Different, Samuel said. Not easier exactly, but different. The sharp edges dull a bit with time. You learn to carry it. They finished their meal in companionable silence, and when they mounted up to continue back to Georgetown, Clara realized she felt less alone than she had in months. Having someone who understood loss, who did not offer empty platitudes or tell her to simply move on, was a gift she had not expected. As the weeks passed and autumn deepened into early winter, Clara and Samuel fell into an easy rhythm. The routes were dangerous. There was no denying that. They encountered attempted robberies, aggressive drifters, and once, a small rock slide that nearly took them both off the mountain trail. But with Samuel riding beside her, Clara found she could breathe a little easier. He was a crack shot with his rifle and had a calm competence in dangerous situations that made her trust his judgment. More than that, though, she found herself looking forward to their conversations. Samuel had traveled extensively before settling in Colorado, and he told her stories about Texas and New Mexico territory, about cattle drives and frontier towns. In return, Clara shared her love of books and learning, reciting poetry she had memorized years ago, and discussing the novels she borrowed from the small lending library in Georgetown. You really should be a teacher, Samuel said one afternoon in late October as they rode through a valley brilliant with fall colors. You have a way of explaining things that makes them interesting, and you are clearly smart enough. Clara felt warmth rise in her cheeks at the compliment. Maybe someday, once the debts are paid. How much longer? Samuel asked. 6 months if I can keep this job and nothing goes wrong. 6 months and we will be clear. Samuel nodded thoughtfully but said nothing more. Clara noticed he had been more quiet than usual today, but she did not press. Everyone was entitled to their private thoughts. That night, as Samuel made camp a respectful distance from where Clara had laid out her bedroll during one of their overnight trips to the more distant mining camps, he finally spoke what was on his mind. I have been thinking, he said, poking at the small fire between them, about what comes after you pay off those debts. Clara wrapped her blanket more tightly around her shoulders against the cold mountain air. What about it? Well, I was thinking maybe I could help. I have some money saved up, not a lot, but enough that it might shave a few months off what you owe. Clara straightened, surprised and a little alarmed. Samuel, I could not possibly accept that. You have been more than generous with your time already. I will not take your money too. It is not charity, Samuel said quickly. Or at least not just charity. I was thinking it could be more like an investment. An investment in what? Samuel met her eyes across the fire, and Clara saw nervousness there that she had never seen before, not even when they were being shot at. In a future, maybe one we could build together. Clara's heart began to beat faster. Samuel, what are you saying? He stood up, circling the fire to crouch beside where she sat. I am saying that these past 2 months riding with you have been the best part of my days. I wake up looking forward to seeing you, to hearing what you think about things, to just being near you. I know it is maybe too soon to say such things, and I know I am just a ranch hand with no real prospects, but Clara, I am falling in love with you. And if you feel even a fraction of what I feel, maybe we could talk about a future that includes both of us. Clara's breath caught in her throat. She had been trying so hard not to acknowledge the feelings growing in her own chest. The way her heart lifted when she saw Samuel waiting for her in the mornings. The way she found excuses to ride closer to him on the trail. She had told herself it was foolish, that she had no room in her life for romance when she was fighting just to survive. But hearing him speak the words made all her careful walls crumble. "I feel it too," she whispered. "I have been trying not to, trying to focus on what I need to do, but Samuel, I think about you all the time. When I am not with you, I am counting the hours until I see you again." Samuel's face broke into a wide smile, and he reached out to take her hand. "Then maybe we can figure this out together. Pay off your debts, and then maybe you could think about whether you might want to marry a cowboy who does not have much to offer except his whole heart." Clara laughed, feeling tears prick her eyes. "That sounds like more than enough to me." Samuel leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. Clara did not want to. When his lips met hers, it was gentle and sweet, full of promise. The kiss lasted only a moment, but when they pulled apart, Clara felt like something fundamental had shifted in her world. For the first time since her father died, she allowed herself to hope for something beyond just getting through each day. "We should probably sleep," Samuel said softly, reluctantly releasing her hand. "Dawn comes early." "Yes," Clara agreed, though she was not sure she would be able to sleep with her heart racing like this. Samuel moved back to his side of the fire, but the space between them felt different now, charged with possibility. As Clara lay in her bedroll staring up at the stars, she found herself imagining a future she had not dared to dream of before. A future with Samuel. Maybe a small house somewhere, maybe students to teach, maybe children of their own someday. The details were hazy, but the feeling was clear and strong. Hope. The next morning brought clouds heavy with the promise of snow, and they made good time back to Georgetown, both eager to beat the weather. As they rode, Clara's mother came out of their small house at the edge of town, her face creased with worry. "Clara, thank goodness," she said as Clara dismounted. "Mr. Henderson was here looking for you yesterday. He said he needs to speak with you urgently." Clara's stomach dropped. Henderson was one of the men her father had owed money to, the most unpleasant and demanding of the lot. "Did he say what about?" "No, just that you need to see him at his office before the end of the week." Samuel had dismounted as well, and he stepped close to Clara. "You want me to come with you?" Clara wanted to say yes, but she knew Henderson would see that as weakness, as her needing a man to speak for her. She had been dealing with him on her own for 2 years, and she needed to see this through. "I will go tomorrow, but thank you." Her mother looked between them, clearly noticing something different in how they stood together, but she said nothing. Samuel tipped his hat to both women. "I will see you Wednesday morning then, Clara." "Wednesday morning," she confirmed, and the smile they exchanged said everything that words could not. The next day, Clara went to Henderson's office with dread sitting heavy in her stomach. Henderson was a man in his 50s who had made his money through various business ventures, most of which skirted the edges of legality. He sat behind a large desk in a room that reeked of cigar smoke and looked at Clara with cold calculation. "Miss Parsons, thank you for coming. I wanted to discuss your father's debt." "I have been making regular payments," Clara said, keeping her voice steady. "I have not missed a single one." "That is true," Henderson acknowledged. "However, I have decided I need the remainder of the debt paid in full by the end of the month." Clara felt the blood drain from her face. "That is impossible. I still owe almost $500. That was meant to be paid over the next 6 months. Nevertheless, circumstances have changed. I need the capital for another investment opportunity. You have until November 30th. If the debt is not paid in full by then, I will be forced to take possession of your home as collateral." "You cannot do that," Clara said, but even as she spoke, she knew he could. Her father had put the house up as surety for the loan. "I can and I will," Henderson said flatly. "1 month, Miss Parsons. I suggest you start thinking about where you and your mother will live come December." Clara left the office feeling like the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. 6 months she could have managed, with careful saving and her postal salary. But $500 in 1 month was impossible, no matter how many routes she rode. She walked through Georgetown in a daze, barely seeing the familiar buildings and faces. By the time she reached home, she had composed herself enough to tell her mother what had happened. "We will think of something," her mother said, though her voice trembled. "Maybe we can sell what little we have left, maybe I can take on more washing." But they both knew it was hopeless. They had already sold everything of value. There was nothing left to give. That night, lying in bed, Clara allowed herself to cry for the first time in months. Not just for the house they were about to lose, but for the future she had only just begun to imagine. How could she think about marriage and happiness when she could not even keep a roof over her mother's head? Wednesday morning arrived gray and cold, with snow beginning to fall. Clara almost did not go to ride the mail route, but in the end, duty and the desperate need for every dollar of pay drove her to saddle up. Samuel was waiting as always, but his smile faded when he saw her face. "What happened?" he asked immediately. As they rode, Clara told him everything. Samuel listened in grim silence, his jaw tightening as she explained Henderson's ultimatum. $500 in 1 month, he said when she finished. "That is criminal. He knows you cannot pay it." "But it is legal," Clara said bitterly. "My father signed the papers. Henderson has every right to collect." They rode in silence for a while, Samuel clearly thinking hard about something. Finally, as they approached the first mining camp, he spoke. "I have about $200 saved. It is yours if you want it, and I can try to borrow more from people I know, maybe get together another 100. Clara felt tears sting her eyes. "Samuel, that is your life savings. I cannot take that from you." "You are not taking it, I am offering it." "Clara, I meant what I said the other night. I want a future with you. That means helping you through this. But it is not enough. Even with $300, we would still be 200 short, and where would I even get that much money in a month?" Samuel was quiet again, and then his expression changed. "What if you did not have to get it?" "What do you mean?" "What if Henderson could not collect? What if something happened to prevent him from forcing you to pay?" Clara looked at him in alarm. "Samuel, what are you thinking? We cannot do anything illegal. I will not let you ruin your life for me." "I am not talking about doing anything to Henderson himself," Samuel said quickly. "But what if there was a way to delay things to buy you more time? There has to be something." "I do not think there is," Clara said sadly. "The law is on his side." They delivered the mail in heavy silence, the snow falling harder as the day progressed. By the time they turned back toward Georgetown, visibility was poor and the temperature had dropped sharply. They were taking a different route back, one that skirted higher up the mountain but was shorter in distance. That was when they heard the shouts. Samuel held up a hand and they both stopped, listening. The sounds were coming from somewhere ahead, male voices raised in anger or fear. Samuel and Clara exchanged glances, and without needing to discuss it, they urged their horses forward carefully. Around a bend in the trail, they found a wagon tilted at a dangerous angle, its right wheels hanging over the edge of a steep drop. 2 men were trying to calm the horses, which were panicking and threatening to pull the whole wagon over the cliff. A woman stood to the side, her hands pressed to her mouth in terror. Samuel did not hesitate. He dismounted and moved quickly toward the wagon, assessing the situation. "Clara, Grab my rope from my saddle. We need to secure this before those horses spook completely." Clara obeyed, her heart pounding. She had faced danger plenty of times on the mail route, but this felt different, more immediate. Samuel was already at the wagon, trying to wedge rocks under the hanging wheels while shouting instructions to the two men. "You need to unhitch the horses before they pull it over," he called. "Slow and steady. Do not make any sudden movements." One of the men started working on the hitches while the other held the horses' heads, speaking in soothing tones. Clara brought the rope to Samuel, who quickly began securing it around the wagon's axle, then looping it around a sturdy tree growing from the mountainside. "Clara, can you help the woman move whatever cargo they have to the safe side of the wagon? We need to redistribute the weight." Clara climbed carefully into the wagon bed, where she found it loaded with supplies and tools. The woman joined her, and together they began shifting heavy items toward the left side, away from the cliff edge. Every movement made the wagon creak ominously. "Easy," Samuel called. "Nice and slow." It took nearly 20 minutes of careful work, but eventually the horses were unhitched and moved to safety. Enough weight had been redistributed, and Samuel's rope was secured well enough that the wagon was no longer in immediate danger of falling. The man who seemed to be in charge, a burly fellow with a thick beard, came over to Samuel and Clara once everyone had caught their breath. "I cannot thank you enough. If you had not come along, we would have lost everything. I am Marcus Reed, and this is my wife Hannah and my brother Thomas." "Samuel Griffin," Samuel said, shaking the man's hand. "And this is Clara Parsons. We were just heading back to Georgetown when we heard you." "Georgetown," Marcus said. "That is where we are headed to. We just bought a claim there, planning to try our luck at mining." "We were told this was a safe route, but clearly our information was wrong. Most routes through these mountains have their dangers," Clara said. "You just have to know them." "Well, you two certainly knew what to do today," Hannah said warmly. She was a woman in her 30s with kind eyes and a tired smile. "We owe you our lives, truly." "Just glad we came along when we did," Samuel said. It took another hour to get the wagon back on stable ground and repacked properly, by which time the snow was falling so heavily that continuing was dangerous. Marcus and Hannah insisted that Samuel and Clara share their camp for the night, and given the weather, there was little choice but to accept. As they sat around the fire that evening, sharing a meal of beans and coffee, Marcus told them about his plans for the mining claim and how he had saved for years to afford this opportunity. "It is our chance at a better life," he said, looking at his wife with affection. "Hannah and I have been working other people's land our whole lives. This claim, if it pays off, could finally give us something of our own." Clara felt a kinship with these people, understanding their hope and desperation for a better future. On impulse, she told them about her own situation with the debt and Henderson's ultimatum. Marcus's expression darkened. "Henderson? I have heard of him. He has a reputation for sharp dealing. That is a tough situation, Miss Parsons." "We will figure something out," Samuel said firmly, reaching over to squeeze Clara's hand. Hannah noticed the gesture and smiled. "You two make a good pair. It is clear you care for each other." Clara felt herself blush but did not deny it. "We have only recently acknowledged our feelings, but yes, we do care for each other very much." "That is worth more than gold," Hannah said. "Marcus and I started with nothing but each other, and somehow we have made it this far." "You will make it through this too," Marcus added, speaking to Clara. "If there is one thing I have learned, it is that people who are willing to work hard and stick together can survive just about anything." His words gave Clara a small measure of comfort, though the problem of the debt still loomed large in her mind. They talked late into the night, and by the time Clara rolled herself into her blankets, She felt she had made true friends in Marcus and Hannah Reed. The next morning dawned clear and cold, the storm having passed in the night. They helped the Reeds get their wagon fully secured and pointed toward Georgetown before Samuel and Clara continued on their way. "Good people," Samuel said as they rode. "Yes," Clara agreed. "I hope their claim works out for them." The next 2 weeks were a blur of desperate activity. Samuel made good on his word, giving Clara the $200 he had saved and managing to borrow another $100 from various people he knew. Clara's mother sold the last of her jewelry, bringing in another $50. But it still was not enough. By mid-November, they had managed to scrape together $375. They were still $125 short with only 2 weeks remaining. Clara was riding her routes on sheer determination now, barely sleeping as she tried to think of some solution that did not exist. Samuel stayed by her side through it all, his presence a source of strength even when hope seemed lost. It was on a Monday morning, just 10 days before Henderson's deadline, that Marcus Reed came looking for them. Clara was preparing to head out on her route when Marcus rode up on a sturdy bay horse, his face alight with excitement. "Miss Parsons, Mr. Griffin, I have been looking for you." "I have news." "What kind of news?" Clara asked, though she could not imagine what could warrant such excitement. "Our claim. We hit a decent vein of silver 2 days ago. Nothing that is going to make us rich, but enough that we have already sold our first batch of ore." "Good enough that I can pay back the debt I owe you." Clara frowned in confusion. "You do not owe us anything, Mr. Reed." "We owe you our lives," Marcus said firmly. "If you and Mr. Griffin had not stopped to help us that day, we would have lost everything, maybe even died on that mountain. Hannah and I talked about it, and we want to give you the money from our first sale. It is not charity, it is paying a debt of honor." He pulled out a leather pouch and handed it to Clara. "There is $200 there. We heard around town about your situation with Henderson. Please, let us help you the way you helped us." Clara stared at the pouch, unable to speak. $200. Combined with what they had already saved, it was more than enough to pay Henderson in full. Tears began streaming down her face before she could stop them. "I do not know what to say," she managed. "Say you will take it," Hannah said, riding up beside her husband. "Say you will let us do this small thing to repay a debt we can never truly repay." Samuel moved his horse closer to Clara's, his own eyes bright with emotion. "Take it, Clara. Let them help. You have been carrying this burden alone for too long." Clara looked at these good people, at Samuel's encouraging face, and finally nodded. Thank you so much. I will never forget this kindness." "You just did what was right when you saw people in trouble," Marcus said. "We are doing the same." That afternoon, Clara walked into Henderson's office with $575, enough to pay the debt in full with even a bit extra. Henderson looked surprised and not entirely pleased to see her, clearly having assumed she would default. "The debt is paid," Clara said, placing the money on his desk. "In full. I want a receipt showing the debt is satisfied and that my home is free and clear." Henderson counted the money slowly, his expression sour, but there was nothing he could say. Clara had met his terms. He wrote out the receipt and handed it to her with poor grace. Clara walked out of that office feeling like she could fly. The weight she had been carrying for 2 years was finally, blessedly gone. She ran most of the way home, bursting through the door to find her mother mending by the window. "It is done," Clara said, waving the receipt. "The debt is paid. The house is ours." Her mother burst into tears, and Clara held her as they both cried tears of relief and joy. When they finally pulled apart, her mother looked at her seriously. "That young man, Samuel. He helped with this, did he not?" "Yes," Clara said. "He gave me his life savings, and he has been riding with me, keeping me safe for months now without asking for anything in return. He loves you, her mother said simply. I love him too, Clara admitted. He asked me to think about marrying him. Her mother smiled, the first real smile Clara had seen on her face in so long. Then I think you should say yes. Life is too short to deny yourself happiness when you find it. That evening, Samuel came by the house. Clara met him outside, and before he could say anything, she threw her arms around him. Thank you, she said against his chest. Thank you for everything. For riding with me, for believing in me, for helping me when I had no right to ask. You never had to ask, Samuel said, holding her tight. I would do anything for you, Clara. I love you. I love you too, Clara said, pulling back to look up at him. And yes. Yes to what? Yes, I will marry you. Yes to building a future together. Yes to everything. Samuel's face broke into the widest smile she had ever seen on him, and he lifted her right off the ground, spinning her around as they both laughed. When he set her down, he kissed her with a passion that made her dizzy and warm despite the cold November air. We should do this properly, Samuel said when they finally broke apart. Let me talk to your mother, ask her blessing. She already knows and approves, Clara said, but you should ask her anyway. She will appreciate it. Samuel did just that, going inside to speak formally with Clara's mother, who gave her blessing with tears of happiness. They decided to marry in the spring, giving themselves time to plan and prepare properly. The winter months that followed were some of the happiest of Clara's life. She continued riding the mail routes with Samuel beside her, but now they rode as an engaged couple, making plans for their future. Samuel took a job working at the general store in Georgetown to help build up their savings again, while Clara kept her postal contract. They decided that once they were married, Clara would continue teaching herself and prepare to take the teaching examination. With the debt gone and 2 incomes, they could afford for Clara to eventually transition from mail riding to teaching. Samuel fully supported her dreams, never once suggesting she should stay home or limit her ambitions. In March, they received an invitation to Marcus and Hannah Reed's home for dinner. The Reeds had done well enough with their claim to build a small but solid house, and Hannah was expecting their first child. Over a meal of venison and potatoes, Marcus proposed a toast. To friends who showed up when we needed them most. To Clara and Samuel, may your marriage be as happy as ours, and may you always find people to help you when the trail gets rough. To friends, Samuel agreed, raising his glass. As spring arrived and the snow began to melt from the mountain passes, Clara and Samuel were married in the small church in Georgetown on an April morning filled with sunshine. Clara wore a simple dress of cream-colored cotton that her mother had sewn, with wild flowers in her hair. Samuel wore his best suit, his dark hair neatly combed and his gray eyes shining with joy. The ceremony was small but heartfelt, attended by Clara's mother, the Reeds, and a handful of other friends they had made in town. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife and Samuel kissed her, Clara felt like her heart might burst from happiness. This man who had appeared in her life like an answer to a prayer she had not known to say, who had stood beside her through danger and difficulty without asking for anything in return, was now her husband. They held a simple reception at the boarding house where Samuel had been renting a room, with cake and music and dancing. Clara danced with Samuel until her feet hurt, laughing more than she had in years. When the sun began to set and the guests finally left, Samuel carried Clara over the threshold of the small house they had rented at the edge of town, a place that would be truly theirs. That night, as they lay together in the darkness, Samuel traced patterns on Clara's arm and spoke softly. I never thought I would be this happy again. After my sister died, I thought that part of life was just over for me. And then I heard about a brave woman riding mail through the most dangerous territory in Colorado, and I thought maybe I could at least keep her safe. I never imagined she would save me right back." Clara turned to face him, able to make out his features in the moonlight streaming through the window. "We saved each other. You gave me hope when I thought I would drown in debt and duty. You reminded me that I was allowed to want more from life than just survival." "I love you, Clara Griffin," Samuel said, using her married name for the first time. "I love you too," Clara whispered and kissed him. The months that followed established a new rhythm to their lives. Clara continued riding the mail routes, but now Samuel rode beside her as her husband, and somehow that made even the dangerous parts feel like an adventure they were sharing. She began studying in earnest for the teaching examination, and Samuel helped her prepare, quizzing her on facts and listening as she practiced lessons. In the fall, nearly a year and a half after they had first met, Clara took the examination and passed with high marks. The school board in Georgetown offered her a position teaching the younger children, starting in January. Clara accepted with joy, though she admitted to Samuel that she would miss the freedom of riding through the mountains. "You can still ride," Samuel pointed out. "Just for pleasure instead of work. And maybe when summer comes, we can take longer trips, see more of the territory." "I would like that," Clara said. She rode her final mail route in December, with Samuel beside her as always. As they traveled the familiar trails one last time, Clara found herself reflecting on how much had changed. 2 years ago, she had been desperate and alone, carrying a burden that seemed impossible. Now she had a husband she loved, a home that was truly hers, and a career that would allow her to use her mind and help shape young lives. "No regrets?" Samuel asked as they returned to Georgetown after delivering the last batch of mail. "Not a single one," Clara said. "Well, maybe one small regret." "What is that?" "I regret that we did not meet sooner. I wish I had known you my whole life." Samuel smiled. "We will just have to make the most of all the years we have ahead." Clara started teaching in January of 1880 and discovered she loved it even more than she had imagined. The children were eager and curious, and Clara found deep satisfaction in watching them learn and grow. Samuel continued working at the general store, but he also started taking on carpentry projects on the side, discovering a talent for building and fixing things. In the spring of that year, Clara realized she was pregnant. She told Samuel one evening after dinner, feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Samuel's reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He picked her up gently and held her close, his voice thick with emotion. "A baby. We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" Clara asked. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Samuel said. "Clara, you have given me so much already. And now this. I never imagined I could be this blessed." Their son was born in early December, a healthy baby with his father's dark hair and his mother's green eyes. They named him Thomas Samuel Griffin, after Samuel's father and to honor Samuel himself. Clara's mother, who had moved in with them during the final months of pregnancy, doted on her grandson with fierce devotion. The first year of Thomas's life passed in a blur of sleepless nights and profound joy. Clara took a break from teaching for that year, but returned to the classroom when Thomas was old enough to be watched by her mother during school hours. Samuel had built a small addition onto their house, giving them more room for their growing family. Marcus and Hannah Reed remained close friends, and their daughter, Anna, became a regular playmate for Thomas. The two families often shared meals together, and Clara never forgot that it was the Reeds' generosity that had helped her escape the crushing debt that had defined her early 20s. When Thomas was 3 years old, Clara became pregnant again. This time, she gave birth to a daughter they named Sarah Grace, after Samuel's sister who had died so young. It was Samuel who suggested the name, saying he wanted to honor his sister's memory by giving her name to a child who would be raised with love and protection. Sarah would have loved that, Clara said, holding their newborn daughter and watching Thomas peer curiously at his baby sister. The years continued to roll forward, bringing the usual mixture of joy and challenge that fills any life. Samuel's carpentry business grew until he was able to leave the general store and work for himself full-time. Clara became the head teacher at the school, respected in the community for her dedication and skill. Their children grew strong and healthy, Thomas inheriting his father's calm steadiness, and Sarah getting her mother's fierce determination. When Thomas was 7 and Sarah was 4, Clara received a letter that would change their lives in an unexpected way. It was from a wealthy widow in Denver who had heard about Clara's teaching and wanted to fund the establishment of a proper school in Georgetown, one with multiple teachers and a broader curriculum. She wanted Clara to help plan and eventually lead this new school. Clara and Samuel discussed the opportunity at length. It would mean more responsibility for Clara and would require some investment of their own money and time. But it would also mean better educational opportunities for all the children in Georgetown, including their own. "I think you should do it," Samuel said. "This is what you have always wanted, a chance to really make a difference, and I know you will do it well." With Samuel's support, Clara agreed to take on the project. It took nearly 2 years of planning and fundraising, but eventually, a new schoolhouse was built on the edge of Georgetown, a beautiful 2-story building with proper classrooms and a library. Clara became the headmistress, overseeing 3 other teachers and more than 60 students. The night before the new school opened, Clara stood with Samuel on their front porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and pink. Thomas and Sarah were inside with their grandmother, getting ready for bed. "Did you ever imagine this?" Clara asked Samuel. "Back when we first met, when you were just this mysterious cowboy following me through the mountains," Samuel laughed. "No, I cannot say I imagined any of this specific. I was just thinking about keeping you alive and maybe, if I was very lucky, convincing you to fall in love with me. All the rest of this, the school and our home and our children, that was beyond anything I let myself dream about." "It is beyond anything I dreamed too," Clara admitted. "I was so focused on just surviving, on paying off the debt and getting through each day. I could not see past that to what life could be." "You did more than survive," Samuel said, wrapping his arm around her waist. "You built something beautiful. And you did it while riding through some of the most dangerous territory in Colorado and raising 2 children and being the best teacher this town has ever seen." "We built it together," Clara corrected. "None of this would have been possible without you. You gave me the courage to hope again. You showed me that I did not have to carry everything alone." Samuel kissed the top of her head. "That is what partners do. We carry things together." As the years passed, Clara and Samuel watched their children grow into fine young adults. Thomas inherited his father's talent for building and began working alongside Samuel in the carpentry business. Sarah, much to Clara's delight, showed a passion for teaching and began helping at the school as soon as she was old enough. Clara's mother lived to see both of her grandchildren grown, passing peacefully in her sleep at the age of 78. Her death was sad but not tragic, a natural end to a life that had seen hardship but also great joy in its later years. Marcus and Hannah Reed remained friends for life, their mining claim eventually playing out but leaving them with enough money to buy a small ranch outside of Georgetown. Their children and Clara and Samuel's children grew up together, forming bonds that lasted into their own adulthoods. When Clara was 45, she was offered a position with the Territorial Education Board, overseeing schools throughout Colorado. It was a tremendous honor, but it would have required extensive travel and time away from Georgetown. After much thought, Clara declined. She realized that what she loved most was not the prestige or the power, but the direct connection with students and teachers. She wanted to see children learn, to watch their faces light up when they understood something new. She wanted to be present in her community and for her family. "I have everything I want right here," she told Samuel when she explained her decision. "Why would I leave?" Samuel, who by this point had silver threading through his dark hair and laugh lines around his eyes, smiled at her with the same love he had shown since the beginning. "You would have been wonderful at it, but I am glad you are staying. I have gotten rather used to having you around." On their 20th wedding anniversary, Samuel surprised Clara with a trip to the spot where they had first met, where Clara had stopped and confronted him for following her all those weeks. They rode up into the mountains on a beautiful May morning, their horses taking the familiar trails with ease. When they reached the clearing, Samuel dismounted and helped Clara down. The aspens were bright with new spring leaves, and wildflowers dotted the meadow grass. 20 years ago, give or take a few months, I followed you to this spot," Samuel said. "I was so nervous, wondering if you would shoot me or hear me out. I told you about my sister, and you took a chance on me." "Best decision I ever made," Clara said. Samuel pulled something from his saddlebag, a small wooden box he had carved himself. Inside was a silver necklace with a pendant shaped like an envelope, in honor of her days riding the mail routes. "I know we usually do not make much fuss over anniversaries," Samuel said. "But 20 years with you has been the greatest gift of my life. I wanted to mark it with something special." Clara felt tears gather in her eyes as Samuel fastened the necklace around her neck. "It is perfect. You are perfect. I love you so much, Samuel." "I love you too," he said. "Here is to 20 more years, and then 20 more after that." They stayed in the clearing for a long time, talking about their children, their work, their dreams for the future. Eventually, they remounted and rode back to Georgetown, side by side as they had been for 2 decades. As Clara grew older, she began to slowly hand over more of the school administration to Sarah, who had become a gifted teacher in her own right. Thomas had married a young woman named Elizabeth, and they gave Clara and Samuel 3 grandchildren who filled their lives with noise and chaos and boundless joy. On the evening of Clara's 50th birthday, her house was full of people, children and grandchildren and friends, all gathered to celebrate. Clara looked around at the faces she loved and felt profound gratitude for the life she had built. Later, after everyone had gone home and the house was quiet, Samuel found Clara sitting on the porch, looking out at the mountains silhouetted against the night sky. "Tired?" he asked, settling into the chair beside her. "Happy," Clara said. "Just sitting here thinking about how different my life could have been. If you had not started riding with me, if I had not let you, if any number of small things had gone differently." "But they did not go differently," Samuel pointed out. "We found each other. We built this life together." "Do you ever regret it?" Clara asked. "Tying yourself to a stubborn woman who insisted on riding through dangerous mountains to deliver mail," Samuel laughed. "Never, not once. You were never a burden, Clara. You were a gift. You still are." Clara reached over and took his hand, their fingers intertwining with the ease of long practice. "You know what I think about sometimes? That first kiss by the campfire when you told me you were falling in love with me. I was so scared to let myself feel anything, so sure that hoping for happiness would just lead to more pain." "And were you wrong?" Samuel asked gently. "Completely wrong," Clara said, smiling. Loving you has been the easiest thing I have ever done. It is everything else that is complicated." As Clara moved into her 50s and then her 60s, she finally fully retired from teaching, though she still volunteered at the school regularly and never missed a chance to read to the younger students. Samuel continued his carpentry work as long as his hands and back allowed, creating beautiful pieces of furniture that were treasured throughout the community. Their children thrived. Thomas and Elizabeth eventually had 5 children total, keeping Clara and Samuel busy with grandparenting duties. Sarah married a teacher from Denver, a kind man named William, and they had 2 children of their own. Both families stayed in or near Georgetown, meaning Clara and Samuel were able to remain closely involved in their grandchildren's lives. When Clara was 65 and Samuel 68, they took a long trip together, something they had always talked about but never quite made time for. They traveled by train to San Francisco, marveling at how much the West had changed since their youth. The wild frontier they had known was giving way to cities and industry, railroads and telegraph lines connecting places that had once been isolated. "You miss it?" Clara asked Samuel one evening as they stood on the beach watching the Pacific Ocean. "The old days, when things were simpler." Samuel considered the question. "I miss some parts, the open spaces, the sense that anything was possible, but I do not miss the danger, and I do not miss being young and alone. I will take growing old with you over being young without you any day." Clara leaned against him, feeling the solid warmth of his body, still strong despite his years. "That is a good answer." They returned to Georgetown after a month away, happy to be back in their own home and surrounded by family. Clara's health remained good, and she maintained her sharp mind and quick wit. Samuel developed some arthritis in his hands but continued to putter around his workshop, making small toys for the grandchildren. On their 40th wedding anniversary, the whole family gathered for a celebration that filled their house and spilled out into the yard. Clara looked at the crowd of people, many of them descendants of her and Samuel's love, and felt almost overwhelmed by the fullness of it all. Samuel found her standing under the old oak tree in the yard, taking a moment to herself. "There you are, people are asking for you." "I just needed a minute," Clara said. "It is a lot to take in." Samuel stood beside her, his hand finding hers automatically. "We did well, did we not?" "Built something good." "We did better than well," Clara said. "We built something wonderful." As the celebration continued around them, Clara thought about the young woman she had been at 22, riding desperate and alone through dangerous mountains, caring for a burden of debt that seemed impossible to overcome. She thought about the cowboy who had appeared like Providence, asking only to ride beside her and keep her safe. She thought about all the moments of choice, large and small, that had led to this evening, to this family, to this life. "Thank you," she said to Samuel. "For what?" "For everything. For following me, for staying, for loving me even when I was too scared to love you back, for building this life with me." Samuel turned to face her fully, his weathered face creased with the smile she loved so much. "Clara Griffin, you have been the great adventure of my life. Every single day with you has been worth living." Clara stretched up to kiss him, and for a moment they were young again, standing by a campfire in the mountains, choosing to take a chance on love despite all the reasons not to. The years that followed were quieter but no less full. Clara and Samuel settled into a comfortable old age, their days structured around family visits, small projects, and the simple pleasure of each other's company. They remained active in their community, respected elders who were often consulted for advice or asked to share stories of the old days. Clara lived to see the new century arrive, marveling at the turn from 1899 to 1900. She was 74 years old, still sharp and mobile, still deeply in love with her husband of nearly 50 years. Samuel was 77, moving a bit slower but still making her laugh every day. One spring morning, when the aspens were bright with new leaves and the mountains were shedding the last of their winter snow, Samuel and Clara took a walk through Georgetown. They moved slowly, arm in arm, greeting neighbors and stopping to watch their great-grandchildren play in the street. "It is a good life we have had," Samuel said as they paused to rest on a bench outside the school Clara had built so many years ago. "The best," Clara agreed. "I would not change a single thing. Not even the scary parts, the debt, the danger," Clara thought about it. "No, not even those. Because they led to you, and you were worth everything." Samuel kissed her temple gently. "I feel the same about you." They sat together in the sunshine, an old couple who had built a life of love and purpose from the raw materials of courage and commitment. Around them, the town they had helped build bustled with activity, full of families and children and the constant forward motion of life. Clara leaned her head on Samuel's shoulder, feeling profoundly content. She had delivered mail across dangerous territory, and a cowboy had ridden beside her every single route. That simple act of companionship had transformed her life, had given her not just safety but love, not just survival but purpose. She had gone from carrying letters for strangers to carrying hope for children, from fighting to pay off debts to building something that would outlast her. "We should head home," Samuel said eventually. "Sarah is bringing the children for dinner." "Just a few more minutes," Clara said. "I want to sit here with you a little longer." Samuel settled back, content to stay as long as she wanted. That was how they had always been, meeting each other where they were, walking through life side by side. As the sun moved across the sky and the sounds of the town washed over them, Clara thought about legacy, about what they would leave behind when they were gone. It would not be wealth or fame. It would be simpler and more precious than that. It would be children who had been taught well, a community that had been served faithfully, a family that had been loved completely. It would be the memory of two people who had found each other in the wilderness and chosen to build something beautiful together. Years later, when Clara was 82 and Samuel 85, they passed away within weeks of each other, as if neither could bear to be in the world without the other. Their funeral was attended by more than 200 people, multiple generations who had been touched by their lives and their love. Sarah, speaking at the service, told the story of how her parents had met, a cowboy following a male rider through dangerous territory, both of them carrying wounds from loss, both of them finding healing in each other. She spoke of the school her mother had built, the furniture her father had crafted, the family they had raised with such devotion. "My parents taught us that love is not just a feeling but a choice you make every day," Sarah said, tears streaming down her face. They chose each other every single morning for more than 50 years. They chose to work hard to serve their community, to raise their children with wisdom and care. They were not perfect people, but they were perfectly committed to each other and to the life they built together. That is their legacy. That is what they leave behind. The school Clara had founded continued for decades, educating generations of children. The furniture Samuel had made became family treasures, passed down and cherished. But more than any physical legacy, Clara and Samuel left behind a story, a testament to what is possible when two wounded people find each other and decide to hope again. Their graves were placed side by side in the Georgetown cemetery, overlooking the mountains they had ridden through together so many times. On the shared headstone, their children had carved a simple inscription that captured the essence of their lives together. She delivered mail across dangerous territory. He rode beside her every single route. Together, they delivered each other home,